Two mates, one obsession, cars. We're here to talk, drive, and occasionally bin it in the name of automotive passion. From dream garages to the latest car news, this is the Ditch Finders podcast. Right, welcome back to the Ditch Finders. Today we're joined by two people who are doing something genuinely bold in the car world, taking on the challenge of building proper driver-focused sports cars, but electric. So we've got Mark Tapscott, Chief Strategy Officer, and Daniel Davey, CEO of Longbow Motors, a brand that's all about proving electric cars can still be exciting, engaging, and people who love driving. So the idea is the chat's going to be about that vision, what makes good drivers' cars, can EVs really capture the same thrill, and how is Longbow planning on shaking things up in a world that's still pretty skeptical about electric sports cars. They've told us to go weapons free, so we're not going to hold back, so let's get stuck in. Firstly, gents, hello, how are you?
Well, thanks. Pleasure to meet you. Hello.
Good. Thank you so much for reaching out, firstly, and then taking time out of what's probably a very, very busy schedule to chat to us. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of Longbow, off camera we spoke a bit about kind of what we do and our passion for cars. So what we'd really like to know for you individually is, was there kind of a defining moment or something that really lit the fuse for you being interested in cars? What really lit that passion for you? If we go for Mark first.
Do you know what? The other night when I was out, someone asked me what my first car was, which led along the same lines. And seeing as it's a car program, I guess we can just talk about cars, right? The first
Absolutely, yeah.
I ever had. You guys are going to be too young to have probably even seen one of these, I imagine. But the original Fiat Panda, the very square boxy thing, It wasn't one of those. It was what?
Okay.
It was the Seat version of that. And I know you've just come back from Spain, and having seen what Seat are doing today, very different from what Seat were doing back then. So this was a cheaper, rebranded version of the Fiat Panda. But, gentlemen, it was the jeans edition. So
okay,
wow.
So, and I don't think they've ever made a car since, and maybe shouldn't have made this one. But the interior, all of the upholstery was denim. Genuine denim with the whole kind of brown stitching, little leather patches on it and everything. And you think that's pretty cool. And then you look in the back seats and realize they're not back seats. It was, in fact, two bars, one at the top, one at the bottom, and denim slung between the two. So basically the rear seat was a hammock. So that wasn't the first thing that got me into cars, as you can imagine. It probably inspired me to do something a whole lot better. But I've always been into them. I think my dad really, really loved cars. And I think the whole thing of him taking me to Brands Hatch and having seen a McLaren F1 kind of fly down the straights and look up in him, his mouth.
Yeah, if that doesn't do it for you, what will?
So I thought, that's it. Well, that's the kind of thing I want to do, right?
Amazing.
Absolutely.
For me, not even as glamorous as that, actually. So my dad was a soldier, but he had a lot of cars. Soldiers actually swapped cars every kind of 6 months. And then as a kid, we didn't have a lot of money. So I just collected Virago models with my best mates and used to put posters on my wall of all my favorite cars and then try and change them around and just learn. I'm such a nerd, learn as many stats as I could about them. And then was into modeling and glue modeling cars and painting them and stuff as well, because that's the closest I thought I'd get to them. And then my first car was more glamorous than Mark's, but not much. It was a Mark III Golf GTI. And I still regret getting the 8-valve, not the 16-valve, in dragon green, and it used to cut out at the traffic lights because the crankshaft alignment sensor was broken. So when you got to 80 degrees oil temperature, the car would cut out on the motorway as well, which was better because then I could bump start it again. So yeah, just tinkering with that and fixing it, and I've just always been into cars. Like I think. You start off and you're like, this is cool, and the whole performance side and the brand side. But for me, once you have a car, once you own it, it's the freedom. Just I really enjoy getting behind the wheel and just driving, even today. So that's what it represents for me is individuality and freedom.
Amazing, yeah, really cool. It's I think when you are a petrolhead, you often get similar sort of stories, whether it be first cars or models, or it's, for me it was like toys as a kid. Just like anyone that got me a toy car, that was always obviously my favorite toy. And it's all of that just leads into, before you know it, you just can't stop scrolling on Auto Trader, and that's your life. There you go. See,
all my cars are up here.
Yeah. You kind of never grow up from it, do you?
No.
I think probably our very first episode, we mentioned about what got us into cars, and we mentioned about, obviously, being born around the 2000s is when gaming started to really blow up on the car scene. But it's a good point. I think the very first thing you really do in the car world is like toy cars. And,
yeah.
I kind of forget that.
Man.
I probably still got them in the box at my parents' house.
Yeah. Still not as cool as backseat jeans, though. That's hammock jeans backseat. That is a cool. How have we not come across this?
It's not aged well. I would assume.
You know what you haven't come across, though, is that very same car that then also, because it was such a joke with me and my friends, because I had this during sort of college years, I basically drove it through Halfords, and anything that could stick to it got stuck to that car, including a fire extinguisher that I proceeded to paint blue and stick some black piping around under the dash to make it look like I had a NOS bottle, because it was Fast and the Furious days.
Just when I thought it couldn't get any better.
Oh, it did.
That is something else.
The puddle jumper, as she was named.
And actually, we're announcing it here. That our first interior is going to be, you got it, slung jeans. That's how we're going to do it. No, we're not.
There we go.
We're not.
It's funny. Interior is going to be one of the things that we ask about later on, but seriously cool origin stories as such, if that's what you want to call them. But it's good to hear that obviously out of what is now electric and has been, I guess, for your careers for a while, that it still was born from kind of out and out petrol headism.
And they're not mutually exclusive. I love lots of petrol cars. I mean, the new Di Tommaso P72, I just want to put that on my wall. And there's so many, there is still so much character and individuality across all powertrains. You can't just say you only like one flavor. But
no, and it's actually a journey I've been on over the last year or so with having a Tesla Model Y and having done 15,000 miles as kind of a more family car or my other half's car. And then you then go from, or originally going from, not interested in electric cars whatsoever, seeing them as the enemy, to actually realizing that they've got a purpose and they're very, very good at certain things. And in other respects, I say to a lot of people that in many aspects, it makes other cars look really stupid.
Yeah.
Because, of how capable and usable they are. So it's been a journey for myself to go from, quite literally your stereotypical petrolhead, not interested in electric, they're the worst thing, and it changing my mind and actually admitting on the last episode that I actually really like them.
Well, there's always been this. There's always been this kind of one or the other, right? So ICEs have always had character and soul and individualities, and EVs have been technically on paper better, but they're just not as characterful. And I think that's not because of the powertrain; it's just how people have built those cars, and that's where we really want to bridge that gap. Actually,
I think it goes hand in hand, doesn't it? When you're introducing technology to EVs, the kind of the theatre of the soul, the connectivity it drops. And instead of thinking about how do you make that more interesting for the driver, everyone is just like throwing technology at the cars to the point where we've now got the Yang Wang U8 that can go across water. Right? Who needs that in a car? How does that add to a driving experience, really? And then we're going to have rocket boosters and we've got fart modes and these kinds of things, which are all great, but it is kind of so far devoid from what a driving experience is anymore.
Yeah. I guess just because it's better doesn't necessarily mean it's better. If you know what I mean, just because it's physically better and can perform better doesn't actually make it better for the driver or all those things that you actually want out of a car.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Well, and it's the key thing here, right, is separating the powertrain and the cabin experience. But every time you get an EV, your powertrain, your cabin experience is the same. So it's hyperscreens and it's digitalization and it's full autonomy. But you can have the powertrain, which is much, much, much better than a ICE powertrain, without that super devoid, drives itself, hyperscreen cabin experience. So that's really what we're focused on is lots of this and none of this, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll we'll definitely delve into that side of things in terms of how you're making Longbow different and still connected to the driver and enthusiasts. I think you mentioned before we started this call about your interest in LinkedIn accounts, and you guys have clearly been around the block in the automotive world. Before we talk about Longbow, is it an okay opportunity to kind of give us a quick run through of kind of your career to date and how you've kind of come to this point in your careers where you're launching an EV sports car brand?
Go on, Mark.
Very kind. So after my early attempts at modifying off-brand Fiats from Halfords, I studied design engineering, and that's really my approach to what we're doing. It's all founded in, what are the physics first principles, something we definitely learned from Elon, Daniel and I. But after having left university, set up a company designing race car products, because I should have said the second car I ever had was actually a Lotus Elise S1.
That's quite a redemption story there for going from.
But you don't get quite the kind of crowd appeal when you say you started your journey with an Elise S1. You have to be humble.
That's true.
But I actually got that car on the way back from university. My parents were furious that I'd saved up most of my student loan and bought that car literally on the way home. So I turned up back at home with my bags from university in the back of an Elise, and of course in the seat and in the footwell and everywhere else, because there's not much space in those cars. And that was it. I was really bitten by the difference that being lightweight really makes. So I had that Lotus Elise, then started building and designing race car components for Lotuses a lot of the time. So a lot of time spent in the Lotus Elise Cup, GT Cup, and then had the chance to also travel across Europe as well, working on other GT90s cars. So the Stealth V6 was a car I worked on a great deal. It's another obscure car, but ran in the GT90s against things like the McLaren F1. And then help with a few other companies building race car components. So Nitron is probably a company you might have heard of that does a lot of suspension, builds things like
Absolutely.
the equipment for the Bloodhound, for the land speed record car. And having kind of gone through all of that, I got to the point of wanting to maybe have more of an impact with my skills in autosport and engineering. And then a friend of mine had a Tesla Roadster. And I first refused to kind of get in the thing because, like maybe your comment from the previous episode, why make a sports car electric? That was very much my view as well. Sat in that car, experienced it, and clearly my life changed from that point onwards. At which point, then a few messages off to Elon, the team back then. Then I was at Tesla. Daniel will filter in. He came in before me. He sort of passed the keys over, took Tesla through from where it was at Roadster, Model S, all the way through to X3, and then also launched Lucid with Daniel across Europe. Have worked with companies like Hyundai, Porsche, BMW, putting together sort of how they can operate in a different way. And then most recently also launched BYD in Saudi Arabia. So we've got quite a bit of experience in launching electric vehicle programs between us, along with a few other things along the way, ice cream companies and all sorts of stuff. But I'll let Daniel jump back in automotive.
So I designed the original seats in the Fiat Panda. No, so I dad was a soldier, grew up there. My dad was a soldier, grew up in the military environment, then actually was on a course to join the military. So I did my parachute course, did Special Forces Reserve and a few other things. So I've always loved a challenge and am a complete nerd. I have this dichotomy of, so I'm a gamer and I play World of Warcraft and paint models. And then on the other side, I'll do endurance challenges and stuff. And so the idea of a regular corporate job or going to work for PwC would just be the end of my life before it even started. So my first job was a recruitment over the summer, and then was looking at where I wanted to work, saw Tesla, this was 2010, and just messaged them on LinkedIn and said, I'd love to work for your company. How do I do it? And then another 20 interview rounds later, I was able to join quite early on, employee 650, one of the first employees in Europe. Started out in the headquarters in what was called the Bull Ring, managed to park the car that's now in space, and just that whole vibe of Tesla at the time. And same thing as Mark, my aha moment. It's like my first day at Tesla in California. First time I've been to California. and then at like 9 a.m, got in a lightning green Tesla Roadster 2.5 Sport outside Menlo Park, which was the original Tesla store, and just driving that for 3 minutes, not even that, 20 seconds. And because I joined thinking, oh, well, it's a plucky startup, it probably won't work, but this is quite cool. And then immediately was converted. And then from there on in, it was how do I get everyone to see what I see? No one heard about Tesla. No one knew about Elon at all. No one was even considering electric cars. Literally, people would register and say they want to speak to us. We'd call up and say we're calling from Tesla, and they'd say Tesla, who?
Yeah,
Tesla, and no, that'll never work. And then I left just before Model S came in because Tesla was becoming too big for me. Worked for a few other Silicon Valley startups, just building things again. I'm drawn to a challenge. I kind of view I'm going to do something I really don't know how to do. It's really difficult. And then by the end of a year or 2 years, I'll know it and I'll be really good at it. And then rejoined Tesla as employee 33,000 for the scale up phase with Model 3, because I saw that as such an important vehicle. And Tesla had kind of stayed in startup mode, and I'd gone and learned things and had got good at structure and building things and learned from kind of better companies, I guess, and then brought that back into Tesla for the Model 3 scale up, where we went from 5,000 cars quarter for 2018 to 25,000 cars delivered in February, March 2019 with a 10% headcount reduction.
Wow.
Which was
some growth.
Yeah. And everyone at the time said, so we went to all the kind of forecasting companies and they said, Tesla will never sell more than 20,000 Model 3s in the first year in Europe, and 100,000 were delivered. So
mad.
That, and then was approached by Lucid. So a lot of the early people from Tesla went to work at Lucid because either Elon fired them or they couldn't work with him anymore. And then joined as the first employee outside of North America, established the entities, hired myself, and then built that out for Europe and Saudi, which was great because it wasn't a blank sheet. The first time when we built Tesla, you had no idea how to do anything. With Lucid, we already knew mostly how to build it and the best people to work with. So that was cool. And then, and even along the road, Mark and I met up again, and then we've been passionate about launching a lightweight sports car. And we saw no one else is doing it. We tried to partner with these existing brands and do it with them, and no one was interested. And so we founded Longbow to do it ourselves.
We should probably ask at this point, shouldn't we? Guys, have either of you actually driven a Tesla Roadster? Because that's obviously clearly very important in our story.
No, we haven't. I've got a customer that's got one of the early ones for sale, and so I need to let him take me out in one.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I think
cool. What is it actually like?
I think rather than give my opinion, I think Daniel's heard this a few times. Someone that I took out in one at some point described it to me with a lot of expletives to begin with, because you imagine back then 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, that was kind of unheard of, right?
Yes.
You are faster than pretty much anything off the line. And he said, this is like something Usain Bolt carrying a backpack full of bricks, because it kind of had that power, that speed, everything else, but you could feel the weight was a little bit heavier than where you'd probably want it. So if you're familiar with the sort of the Lotus, obviously it was sort of built upon, at least as a foundation, the weight distribution is very different. So certainly the dynamics of that vehicle, having the mass where it was, changed that a little bit. But I mean, still, at the time, and even today, right, it's a really, really fun car to drive. And I think, if you don't think sports cars can be electric, a quick dip into that, which is now 15, maybe 20 years old, I guess, in terms of its development. Even if you were to put the batteries that we are using today into that vehicle, everything changes, right? The whole way that electric vehicles are built today is, of course, very, very different from 20 years ago. I mean, imagine the laptops that we're looking at now, what they look like 20 years ago. The same kind of development, if not more, has also happened, of course, in automotive.
Yeah. I've got a question down here for you, Mark, but it might be something you want to jump on as well, Daniel, afterwards. And it's kind of expanding on that. And it's obviously during your early days working with these electric brands, and it's all about the challenge. And I guess the thing has been about adoption. And we're kind of far, I think it's something over 20% of all new cars sold in the UK were electric. So by far, over 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the adoption's there to a point. Does this challenge feel different? Because it's not just about adoption and trying to get people to take on this platform and this product. It's quite a specific challenge within that market, if you know what I mean. So I guess that's my main question: is does it feel like a very much a different challenge to just adoption in the EV world?
I think Daniel talked about why he chose to go and work in certain places because specifically of the challenge. And I mentioned one of the last things I've done recently was launching BYD in Saudi Arabia. And you can imagine a country like Saudi Arabia probably isn't quite ready for EVs. And I should outline the reason for that. Again, it sounded like the next big challenge. We've been really fortunate to work with some of the best EV companies, of course. And doing that in Europe and North America, it might have felt like it was inevitable. It was always going to work, of course, guys. So for me, trying to do that in a market that it certainly wasn't obvious it could work, that was the next challenge. And I think finally, it's now come down to sports cars. It is the last halo to be taken away from electrification. So it is the last challenge, right? There are already myriad $2 million plus EV hypercars. There are some really fantastic SUV electric cars out there, ones that can even, of course, float across the Yangtze. But there aren't any sports cars. And the challenge, I think, is exactly what you outlined in one of your episodes, which is that the immediate reaction, that visceral thing of, this looks great. What engine does it have? Oh, it's electric. Why? And so that's our challenge. That's what we want to really take on now. And the technology today allows us to do it. So whilst we've been wanting to do this probably for 5+ years, I think now is actually really the right time to do that.
Really cool.
Yeah, I'm a bit different, aligned, but a bit different. I hate where automotive is today. It is a front end of a giant corporate skin that sits behind it. That is the very definition of like bureaucracy, right? The layer from a Porsche designer. I think everyone thinks there's this like design studio where there's some Porsche designer draws it, and then a bunch of entrepreneurs go and build the car. It is not. It is a giant corporate sausage factory that runs up all to a giant PE companies that take all the profits and all the joy out of the product. It is so far removed from what people say it is and from what it was when it was first built. And just it feels like from the 90s onwards, cars have gotten heavier. So the first M5 weighed 1.5 tons and adjusted for inflation cost about $80,000. Today, it weighs 2.5 tons and it costs $160,000. It weighs more and it costs more. And sure, it's quicker, but like everywhere else, this innovation has been driven, and it's just like this view that more is better. And that just it goes against physics first principles. It is not. Sports cars are worse every gram you add to them. And there is no soul in automotive. There is manufactured soul that comes through marketing, material, and advertising, but there isn't soul. It is so devoid from what it really is. That's why, like the P72, I love it. It's soul. It's a real car, and it's designed by someone who says, "John, I don't care about all those other. I just make a car that we want to build." Yeah. And for me, a big part of that is that's what we want to build, and we own the company, so no one can tell us we can't build it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting. I guess it proves as well, and I guess one of the points you'll probably want to get across is that, and it coming just from what you said there about sausage factory and this whole corporate world, is that soul isn't actually just because it's got an engine. Soul can be put in, and actually half the issue is this hierarchy, this tier, this structure of company and the size of them that is actually making these cars devoid of soul, not necessarily just whether it's got an engine or not. That's interesting.
When you're adding weight and then you counter weight with trickery, right? Technological trickery to make you try not to feel the weight, but the weight is there. When you add a ton, you have to do a lot of things, clever mechanical things in the vehicle to offset that and still keep the tires on the road and to still drive right. But you're taking the driver out. You're adding a layer between you and the driver that's artificial.
I think it's something we need to celebrate, isn't it? Because that's exactly what we, as petrol heads, want, right? Is that when we talk about it, and the other point we want to talk about is price, because anything that what we think a petrol head should be interested in, these lightweight specials or the kind of limited edition, more focused stuff, is either limited numbers or crazy money. And so one of the things that really surprised me was the price point you guys are obviously launching these at. And it's like, hold on, this is something that's actually attainable, achievable, and something that people can actually enjoy without having to be on a list, having to have bought however many millions of pounds worth of cars, and isn't restricted to a certain amount of numbers. I think that's something to really celebrate as well.
There's a personal piece to this, and I think all good products, they are usually driven kind of fairly autonomously by something. The Model S, right? The reason why that had 2 seats in the back of it, the extra to make it 5, was because Elon had 5 kids at the time and needed the extra space. He really drove that product and said, this is what I want, this is what I need in the car, this is what I think people will enjoy. And when you start mixing a huge marketing team into that, that message really gets diluted. So for us, the whole price point you mentioned there is a part of it that comes back to my story of driving home from university. I could only afford, well, to be honest, I couldn't afford the Lotus Elise at the time. I could definitely only afford one car. So you have to make sports cars usable as well. The idea that it's just a toy that sits there at the weekend, that's great. And there are a lot of people in the world now that can afford to do that. But our mission as a company is to change how the earth feels about sports cars. So it's exactly why we wanted to talk to you, because you're of a generation now, you had that kind of reaction to what an electric sports car is. And the best way we can do that is to create a car that is usable, people can use on the commute every day, that they can enjoy and that they can afford. We don't need another $2 million electric hypercar out there. That doesn't change things.
Absolutely.
My dad, one of my defining moments of automotive, like core memory for me, is, so I used to be in military boarding school in Germany, and my dad came once on a Friday and picked me up, and he'd bought an Audi TT, and which is a lot of money. Like, he'd saved for a long time. I think he just had some kind of promotion bonus from the military as well, and basically splashed on his first ever real toy car. And I remember this Audi TT and my dad waiting there to surprise me with it. And it was the most, it was better than any Ferrari you could imagine. And it had a Bose sound system, it had aluminium brushed kind of thing that enclosed the kind of Bose sound system. And they're not hypercars, right? They're not supercars. They are relatively entry-level sports cars. But the feeling that gave to my dad and to me, and that price point, you can very easily, when you get in the industry and you move up, you think that a £150,000 911 is affordable. It is not. It's not even aspirationally affordable for people. It's, I win the lottery and I buy one. A £65,000 car is expensive. It is. But you can get there, right? You can afford that. That's something aspirational.
Attainable, yeah.
It is. And it's defensible. Because 911, you could be, okay, well, that's my kids go to uni nowadays, is a 911. It's not quite the same.
Yes.
With finance, you can make a £65,000 car stick, and we were in meetings with billionaires and talking about, actually £1 million, £1.5 million isn't much for a car. And we're like, you are mental. It is. It's the car. The world doesn't need, and there are so many of them, right? It doesn't need it. So we were very clear on why we need to hit that price point, because it makes a difference.
I think whilst we're on that point of price, I think, for viewers watching, we'll overlay some pictures of the cars that you've got on display so far. They look like more than a £65,000 car, right?
£1 million hypercars in many respects, especially with I'm trying to think, is it Roadster that's the
Speedster?
Speedster's ruthless.
Speedster. That looks, and that was my initial reaction, is jaw-dropping.
Thank you.
It really is.
Why not? Right? Why should only beautiful things be expensive? Why not have something that is affordable but still looks like that? What's really important though, with that sort of price point and with those kinds of cars, is that even when you are lucky enough to be sat behind the wheel of something like that, maybe the Monza or the Elva, something like this, they're very big cars. They've still got some weight behind them, and you're sat behind several $1 million worth. I don't know how much fun maybe that is for a lot of people when they're blasting around a B road or something. So our objective was to really create something that a sports car should be something that you get in it and you drive it and you can kind of forget about the rest of your day, good or bad. It's just you and the car. And then when you lock it and you walk away, you want to kind of turn around and look back at it again. And I don't think that necessarily comes at a price point. And when you're driving, you don't want to be worrying about the damage that you're causing or if anything happens to it. The most fun I think I've ever had on wheels is on two. And I've had big 1000cc bikes and everything else, but the most fun was on that smaller cc. When you're 125, 400s, and you're doing everything you can to get the most out of it, that's the most sort of fun driving I think you can have. So we're trying to get that sort of sports bike, smaller form factor, nice and tight, focused driving into the car that then looks beautiful, and people say that could be X $1 million.
Yeah, it's kind of the best of everything, isn't it? I have similar stories to both of you in that respect. I had an MX-5 that I did track days in, and I'd go around the track, and I'm in what was a £2,500 MX-5, including the modifications, and I'm passing by 718 Caymans and Boxsters, Alpine A110s, these people's pride and joys, Lotuses that are scared to potentially go off track, whereas I'm trying to get everything out of this car, and I'm on the ragged edge and over. And that's when you have the most fun, because even though you're in by far the cheapest car and probably the least good looking car as such, but you're having the most fun. And similarly, back to your story there, Daniel, I was born in Germany, because Dad being in the army, and they had 200 SXs because it was this affordable sports car, and they absolutely loved them. And any opportunity Dad could get a new set of wheels for them, Mum made sure that as long as she get the car seats in them, she was fine. She just wanted a sports car, and it's that exact same thing.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, can we move on to design? Because we kind of just discussed that as just how jaw-droppingly beautiful they are. But surely there's complications that come with that, with going and doing a Speedster, but then also at that price point. How difficult has that been to get such a beautiful design and quite a bold design at such a price point?
It starts with that. So you don't start with, here's a beautiful car, how do we make that work, right? It is in some ways the output. So we were clear on the kind of car we wanted to build. We were clear on the performance characteristics. We were clear that we wanted a Speedster. And so we started with the other things, right? So the engineering design, manufacturing validation, the business plan on how you ensure that you are profitable, even with low volumes with a car like that. So that's where you start. And naturally, as you work through that, you start to have a journey, and you're sending each other pictures of, okay, like this, but not that because that's hideous, but take this bit, and how you kind of construct it. And then we work with a team at Avant Design, a father and son owners, Jonathan and Chris Gould, who are incredible. And we then, you take the business side and you take the design that we already had, and we kind of, with a gaming designer, put together a vehicle that was super early on. And then we bring this in and we say, it needs to have duality. And initially we were looking at kind of an anti-hero. And then you go through a design phase, and then you just, and actually the craziest thing is the car appeared. So we were, let's say you do 7 sprints. We got to sprint 4. We're like, that's it. No, that's it. Done. Sold. And it just, that kind of jumped out at us, right? And
really cool.
And so you actually do it the other way around. So you have to do it the other way around, because everyone else doesn't. Everyone else starts with the design side, and then they go and try and figure out how to sell it, and then it costs $500,000, and then they try and justify how $500,000 is affordable. You can't. You have to start the other. It has to be a business. It has to make sense, and then the car appears.
It helps being really focused as well. We are very clear on what the car needs to be. I think we'd love to ask you some questions about what a sports car actually means on the call. But when you're very focused, it means that you can put all the energy in the right places without any excess or cost. And another great lesson I think we learned from Tesla and Elon is that you don't spend a single cent on anything that doesn't have a significant direct impact on either the customer or the product. I think that's exactly what we've done. We know what's really important in the car and what customers are going to want, rather than considering about all the optional extras and these things that won't make a difference to the customer. So super, super focused. And that's why we're having a kind of a small elite team with experts that have done this many times before. The team that are working on the engineering, they've been involved in the Elise in the Atom and these projects. So they already know exactly what's going to work well. And that means we can get straight to the point with a product rather than having to have a long process wrapped around it.
Yeah. I think, like I said before the start of the call, I work for an engineering service provider. So I know how much goes into designing a car, certainly surface level, how much goes into designing or engineering a car. So it sounds like you've had some good connections before the start of this project in terms of building that design and engineering team to bring this to fruition.
Absolutely right. We are so fortunate to have been in the industry a while now and just kind of collected a dream team around us, really. It would not be possible if you wanted to just get another group together and do this. I think you'd have a very different outcome. So yeah, super fortunate, big team effort.
That's great.
Lastly, on design, and you may have already had your kind of, like you say, you've been super focused, you know exactly what you want. But being British, and often if you look at Aston Martin and Jag, and often, there's the great Jag advert where they're villains and they kind of stiff upper lipped. But even if you take Lotus into account, it's still quite serious and very focused. Have those been influences, being British and those previous British sports cars, to have something? Because obviously you can see those design elements, in whether that was intentional or not, being very elegant. Were those things that were influenced, being British and those previous British sports cars as such, or did you have your minds made up as to exactly what you want anyway?
We'll probably have different answers to this, or complementary answers maybe, but you're right, but wrong decade. Think 60s, 70s, 80s British, not anything after that, right? Because it's that real, like almost rugged and I don't know if serendipitous is the right word, but more of a scrappy, you're like punching above your weight with incredible cars that do things that just blow people's minds. That kind of British is more us, and it would be more early Bond than later Bond with it as well, right? Less moody and less grim, and a bit more, Roger Moore and Sean Connery era of motoring is more where it's that sense of optimism. I think there's such a sense of pessimism around the British automotive industry and Britain in general, but we are the best at the world at doing this thing that we're doing, and we have such a rich history that we should celebrate. And of course, it's a serious thing building a car, but cars should be fun, and a car program should be fun, and the company should be fun and enjoyable and positive, not
I think when what Daniel's got behind him is a driving factor. What would you want to put as a poster on your wall?
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. There you go.
My son's got the first Longbow room. He's got posters across his room that we printed out.
So cool.
Yeah. He's on board with the idea then.
When it comes to like a design direction, you've probably got two ways to go, which is super modern and angular, which is where we are today, or you go sort of maybe even pastiche and too far in trying to be very classic and look retro. And there are great examples and very, very beautiful cars doing both things now differently. But I think the way we approached it was, we're not building an out-and-out race car here. This isn't something that is going to be entirely shaped by the air. It needs to be incredibly efficient, of course, but if you just stick it in a wind tunnel and design it around that and get engineers to pull that together, you end up with a lot of what we see today, which is that sort of the pebble shape that I think Mercedes went deep into and have maybe kind of retreated from a little bit.
Yeah.
Or you go down the trying to make something look like something else from the past. And none of those really kind of said to us, that's what a modern electric sports car should be. So we've taken inspiration from what we think have been the most beautiful cars of all time, and have kind of really sat there. Ferrari 350 GTOs, these kinds of things that just have those curves that we think are going to be timeless. And a really important part of what we are doing as well is trying to make cars last for 100 years. It sounds like a big kind of ask, but it's entirely possible. And you have to do that with something that is going to be a timeless design as well. So we captured a modern kind of view on what it should be, but also just creating something that is timeless.
We were talking about this the other day. I saw a 296 on the motorway, and usually when you see a Ferrari or these supercars, you glance, you take a look, and you have to take a second look, or you can't stop looking at it. But the 296 I wasn't interested in, but an E-Type goes past, and you can't help but almost crash because you just can't stop looking at it because it's just so cool. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually. And kind of in keeping with that, with kind of 60, 70 cars, and what seems to be a massive ethos for you, and that's lightness, that's that featherweight. How are you managing to keep things so light with EV? Well, in most cases, EV is really, really heavy. Is it a different type of battery technology? Is it just at every single level you've been managed to, like they do in some of the lightweight Porsches, they have a sticker rather than a badge? Has it been that minute, or has it been a case of just the technology's allowed you to do that?
A bonded extruded aluminium chassis for our car weighs 55 kilograms. Right, you start with that. You start with that point. So you start with a lightweight bonded aluminium chassis. Now, if you're not trying to do 0 to 60 in 1.8 seconds, your chassis has to deal with less torsional rigidity or less torsional forces, right? So all of the parts of the vehicle contribute to it being lighter. By not making it ridiculously powerful, it's quick. 3.5 is quick, especially when you're on the ground. There's no roof. That car's going to feel more raw than most cars doing 200 miles an hour. So it's quick, but it's not stupid quick, and it's got the right range, but not stupid range. So a lot of these things help. Just the product definition itself. We have a 50 kilowatt battery pack, and it's right in the base. And there are those are kind of the core things, right? So you start with a product definition that doesn't naturally, because again, if it's got more power, then you need more tire, you need more wheel, you need better suspension, and which makes it heavier. And they're all kind of snowballing weight effects. And as Mark said earlier, what does a car driver want? What's a sports car driver want? Not what does the marketing team say? What does your company platform mandate you use in this car? What does a blank sheet of paper? What does a driver need? That's what goes in. Everything else stays out. It really is that simple. And then, it's that simple.
Yeah. Technology's also come a long way, as we talked about, right? The laptop analogy that we gave. I think we started talking about what happens if you were to put the batteries that we're able to put in our vehicle now into the original Roadster. I think we were at 190 or so kilos weight reduction from that vehicle to still have the same performance and range. So huge differeces are already possible. And then when you combine it with a few things that we can't talk about in details here on the call, but we'll have a world first in the way that our batteries integrate with the chassis as well, which again is just another layer of reducing that weight. And Daniel and I often joke that we have a task for the engineering team, which is 0.5 gram per engineer every day until the car is delivered. And when you kind of have that focus, someone every day has to think about how can they remove even 0.5 gram from what they're designing every single day. At the end of that process, you've already lost quite a lot of weight as well.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. Incentivize. You get incentivized for reducing weight and reducing cost. That you get incentivized that as an employee or as a contractor. That helps to drive it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. My next question was going to be to do with powertrains and if you ever considered any hybrid or a petrol, but I get the feeling that it was always EV with your backgrounds in EV and growing up from the Tesla Roadster. Obviously, the industry itself has kind of turned on its head somewhat to do with EVs over the last year or so. When you think about things like the Mercedes-Benz V8 coming back and delays to the Porsche Boxster and Cayman EVs. Has that had any impact on your process? Because I assume that was quite involved and close to your, the development process for these cars. Is it something you were expecting, or, I think we all appreciate it's probably just a stumble block in the road. But has it had any kind of effect or direction on how you guys have come about this?
We've got to focus on staying in our cockpit and flying our plane, right? Let the industry do what the industry does. Let all those different layers that led up to that decision for whatever reason in that large publicly listed company that is probably the output of a year's worth of decision making, do what it does. We'll do what we do. If anything, it helps us, right? If all the emission standards as a company, all the emission standards getting pushed back helps us, because it means no one's going to put a car in the market because they don't feel they don't have to. Everyone sees it as an obligation, not an opportunity. So that helps us. It hurts me as someone who breathes the same air as everyone else that profits are prioritized over opportunities and progress.
Yes.
But yeah, it does us a favor, to be honest with you. I think
honestly think
will force people to do it sooner.
we can build a better electric sports car. I think that's the point. That if we were saying, okay, make the most compelling, fun sports car today, we believe we can do that through electric. It's not going to have the same sound, of course, but we are going to be putting theatre back into that car. So we now have to work harder, we probably imagine, to win over everyone to get into our car. So we have to put more effort into making that car more engaging than a company that's just going to stick a 4-pot in the back of it and turbocharge it.
Which I guess is for both of you is actually part of why you really want to do it, because that motivates you, incentivizes you so much, I guess. To really, the bigger the challenge, the more reward.
I think we'll know we've done it when Porsche really push forward and go all electric with their sports cars.
Yeah.
Mark said it right, we're building the car for us. Electric powertrains are better cars. The weight will be in the base, the center of inertia, the center of gravity, the control you have at pedal level is way beyond any petrol car, like beyond a Ferrari, like a Ferrari or Formula One car, because it's a chemical reaction, not electrical reaction. Your torque you have, the engagingness, if that's a word, you should have with an EV is beyond anything that can be done with that old rubbishy technology. But just no one's done it in this application, and we're building that into the car because no one's even aware of what's possible because no one's tried to do it. So it's such a fundamental paradigm shift for us in what a sports car is.
Yeah. Was that frustrating for you at any point, knowing what could be done and no one haven't done it yet, and then you see people slating EVs or not necessarily knowing or understanding what actually they're capable of? And I guess that's probably one of the incentives for you guys doing this. But was that frustrating at any point, thinking you have no idea what this is capable of if it's done right?
Frustrating enough for a start car company, right?
I guess, yeah. That's
It would be so much easier. God, we would have just bought one of those. We'd be driving around in one now. So yeah, we'd have an easier life.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good answer. Very, very good answer.
I think we discussed it earlier about the, stepping into a car these days feels like stepping into a computer, right? And that disconnect between the driver and what the engine's doing and the wheels are doing is probably at its greatest point in the auto industry. I know from the press release you guys have done and on your website, there's not too much of a peek of the interior. Can you give us any insight at all in terms of how that will look and how that will contribute to the driving experience?
There's a good reason.
The jeans, yeah.
Special edition with a blue painted NOS bottle. No, there is a very good reason why we haven't shown the interior, because this whole thing we're talking about in theatre and engagement, it's so important, that cockpit experience. And today, in fact, we were having a very lengthy debate about the specific kind of knurling that we want on some of the tactile things that drivers will need to engage with to drive the vehicle, and we kind of want to keep that as a nice surprise for people.
That's fair enough.
I think I'd love to be a fly on the wall of some of these conversations. Just the word knurling alone gets me excited. What have we got next for you guys? Oh, that was it. Specs and colours. Obviously, we've seen some. We really like the two-tone.
Two-tone, lovely, yeah.
Two-tone colours on the cars that you've launched and the concepts that you've launched. Is this something you've looked into? Because a part of owning and buying a car, being able to spec colours, and some cars are famous just for being able to spec a certain colour. Is this something that you've really delved into as part of the experience as well?
If you would have asked us after working at Tesla, we'd have a very different answer. But the way Lucid approaches the interior cabin experience, so colours, materials, and finishes, is just unlike anything, right? So Lucid will say this is Yosemite, and you'll have a bunch of designers, and they'll say it's Yosemite at this grid location at this time of day. So it's Yosemite in this field at 7:03 in the morning, just when the dew is dripping off of the redwood trees, and that inspires how and you feel it, right? I mean, you feel it, and so I think that again, that cockpit experience, it's a human experience. It's not a digital experience. So a lot of energy and time needs to be put into it. balancing obviously the cost and the price point. It's not P72 from a price point perspective. Don't expect the same magnesium dials that they have there, and it will always be a raw cockpit experience. Again, think of the cars, right? The 60s, 70s, 80s British motoring, not the more modern, more luxurious side of it. But yeah, it's so important that the way you use materials and how that feels is so important.
I appreciate you picking up on the two-tone as well. It's something that we really thought quite a lot about, because, again, talking about design and that trying to capture timeless, classic beauty with something that is forward-looking, this is where we have this duality that we kind of called it. So the back half that you've seen in the two different colorways that we've shown being in the darker color, and then that sort of metallic skin that's almost pulled across it. We try and give that nod to the past and to the future and what we're doing, and also it gives another opportunity for customers to really configure the vehicle. We've talked about price, and you've mentioned how other automotive brands look at choosing different color configurations. There's often a huge cost in going for some sort of custom color. And of course, when you then consider the environmental impact of certain things, maybe we will be taking a more unique automotive approach to colouring the vehicles and giving optionality to our customers.
Really cool.
Interesting.
Looking forward to seeing that.
So yeah, again, like I say, working for an engineering company within automotive, we understand how quickly things can change in terms of tech, in terms of battery technology and engineering practices as well. I think we've seen, the build up from electric cars. You had your Volkswagen IDs and that kind of thing, and then a bit more of a standard car. But in the second-hand market, they suddenly drop after a year or two because the technology's moved on so fast. And I think obviously that was more prominent in 2018, for example, than now. How do you ensure that the technology that you're putting into this car now kind of stands the test of time for the next 5 years or decade or however long it will be for this car? Is that a thing that you kind of often have to kind of quantify and make sure that you're up to date with everything in the industry?
When the engine of a F40 has stood the test of time, right? No one's devaluing those cars because the engines are slow or obsolete versus engines created today. If anything, it's a feature, not a bug. So to a degree, that's not entirely the same for electric vehicle, but the way you pull the package together and how you deliver that to the driver is what they're getting, right? We're not focusing on stats. So a customer who wants this car to do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds in 5 years' time that's not what you're going to get. This is the car, and it will do this and will continue to do this for 100 years. We actually focus more on, as an OEM, directly supporting an owner-led refresh program at periodic points. So maybe in 20 years' time, we'll do a refresh program where maybe we reduce weight, right? So same battery pack at a lower weight, same motor, lower weight. So if anything, the car may get lighter over time. But we are focused on keeping it on the road as it is. As Mark said, exterior is timeless. Interior will be timeless. It's not going to be around kind of over-the-air updates every 3 weeks. Think Ferrari F40 doesn't have any over-the-air updates, but it's still on the road. So I think it's decoupling the powertrain and the cabin experience of what it means, because they are different things. Yes, the car we build in 10 years' time will probably be better than the car we do today, but that doesn't mean the car we have today won't be worth more than that because it's appreciated in value, because it's a timeless vehicle. So we think of that completely differently to the rest of the industry.
Yeah, that's cool.
One of the things I've got down here is obviously that your target audience as such is petrolheads to a degree, and somebody that just loves driving and just wants the ultimate driving experience. And that can often include noise, smell, combustion. How do you tackle those things that people are looking for? Or is it a case of re-education, or is it a case of actually focus on this a bit more rather than just those things, if you know what I mean?
First of all, if you remove the windscreen, you get all of those things immediately.
Not wrong.
So I think the biggest thing that a lot of people have against EVs, in our experience over 15 years of starting off trying to sell the things and everything else that we've done, it usually comes down to the sound. I don't think many people sit in a car and go, the way that you can feel that torque, the control that you have through your right foot is a bad thing. It usually comes down to that sound piece. And I think it's really interesting because the first car that got everyone really interested in EV, being the Tesla Roadster, the sound that car made is actually really very cool. Daniel, you know the story closer to heart.
Yeah, so the Dark Knight, the Batman Christian Bale second film, the Bat Bike, they recorded the motor from a Tesla Roadster for that sound, and it's like a fighter jet. Yeah, it's like a jet turbine. You think they do 20,000 RPM, and you've got 400 kilowatts going through these things. There's so much power and force in it. It has a great sound.
So there are opportunities if you know where to look for them, and you guys with your sort of engineering background will know that harmonics is a very difficult thing or a very interesting thing depending on which angle you look at it to play with, and you can make some really interesting things happen with motors in terms of sound. And then you've got the ability to really control a vehicle with your right foot. You're not just driving with the wheel, it's with your foot as well, and electric just gives you more opportunity than any ICE possibly could. Smell, we're going to come up, I guess, with our own brand of cologne or something, Daniel, perhaps, that we put in there. I think one thing that we won't have, though, is the smell of oil or other fluids dripping on the floor in your garage that you've got to then go under and sort out yourself. I think another joy of sports cars is going to be able to actually get in one and use it rather than worrying that something's gone wrong. So maybe there'll be fewer odours, but will be choice.
Just on the subject of sound, what are your general thoughts on companies like Hyundai putting synthetic engine sounds into an electric car? Because I struggle to get my head around it. I've never driven one myself, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think the N program is super cool, right? Daniel and I, more than 5 years ago, were talking about how you can play with torque curves and put shifting into electric vehicles. So again, that level of engagement. And at the time, we were told, that's ridiculous. Nobody wants that. Why would you want to put that in? And of course, today we see that, and it's one of the big talking points. But when it comes to sound, a lot of those OEMs with the cars they're producing, because they're so sort of heavily damped inside, NVH is so very well considered, they have to put that sound in artificially to get something back. Let's just say we think there are other more authentic ways of doing that.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, just enhance what's there, right? A core principle for us is we focus on beauty, authenticity, and connectedness in our products, not stats. So you will see that in the product. You can authentically create that theatre without artificially introducing theatre.
Yeah,
I think those things there exactly, they're going to help towards giving it soul, aren't they? Because you can often mistake the fact that, I've got a bit of a connection with cars because you've almost got to maintain them, and it almost becomes something you look after and your little baby as such, and because you've got to make sure that it's serviced and it's working properly and you put oil and all those things in it, that you gain a connection. But it sounds like you're delivering soul in such a different way that you'll still be able to have that connection, which is obviously one of the criticisms people have of electric cars is no soul, no connection, and therefore no relationship. But I'm really looking forward. It sounds like a very different way of obviously inputting that into a car, but with having that relationship with the car still in mind is really cool.
Think more symbiosis, right? So how do you just become so in tune with that vehicle? And I still maintain that cars breaking down is a bug, not a feature, even though people say it is a feature. You if anything, you lower the barrier to entry for people, because at Tesla, we talked about total cost of ownership a lot, and we just haven't even thought about it really for Longbow, weirdly. And we were thinking about it the other day, and this versus a German coupe that's sold very regularly, you're saving $4,500 a year just in running it, right? Petrol costs, maintenance costs. and that tallies up because no one enjoys a call with a workshop. So theoretically, you can lower the barrier to entry and make it more accessible to people who don't want to deal with the hassle of maintaining an old car. There is a beauty in it, you're right, but most people aren't like that. You probably represent 1% of car owners with it, and
it's that, yeah.
And that's we want to make a car that's more enjoyable for 85%, 90% of car owners, and I think that is where there are opportunities with the powertrain, an EV powertrain.
We talked about challenges earlier on in the call, and I think one of the biggest challenges we've got is trying to use words to explain what we mean by this whole process.
Yes.
It's just like trying to explain to someone, what does it feel like to do 0 to 60 in 2.1 seconds? Well, it's faster than gravity. You can jump off the building and the car will get to the ground faster than you will. But until you've experienced that behind a Tesla Plaid or something, you really don't know what it's about. So I think for us, we're holding back on a lot about what we say, because we want that to be quite an experience and surprise when customers actually get the chance to feel that for the first time. And then hopefully all these questions get answered a lot easier than with our words today.
Absolutely.
I sense there's a lot to come in that sense, in terms of the developments with the cars. So excited to hear that a bit more. And then whilst we're on the subject, really, I think you're launching 150 Speedsters as a limited edition, and then the Roadster will be a bit more of a production model. Will you, obviously you've got a lot to go with at the moment. Will there be, is there a long roadmap with this? Is there going to be other cars, or is it just purely focused on these two cars at the moment?
We shared our manifesto. So manifesto is, we build the Speedster, we prove the brand, and we show we can deliver a lightweight sports car. The Speedster is used to build the Roadster program, which is going up to around 4,000 vehicles a year. Roadster program iterates into the coupe, so 2+2, and then sub-brands built underneath that to deliver that product into different markets around it. And then we go into a supercar as well. So multiple vehicles in the same ethos as this. We can build a car for £65,000 that does not 60 in 3.6 seconds. We can build a supercar.
Yeah. That's exciting. And how difficult is it to then manufacture a new car, but then be doing that in Britain? And were there any considerations to getting it made elsewhere that potentially could have brought the price down, or was it fundamental that it was in Britain?
The UK is still the best place in the world to build a lightweight sports car. Nowhere else really has a heritage in the same way. We've got, of course, the majority of the Formula One teams, Formula E teams, all of that knowledge, and of course the supply chain all sits within the UK. And I think it's such a rich heritage that we have to tap into it. I think if we can, we want to try and elevate some more of what used to happen in British automotive and bring that back again. And sadly, Daniel and I don't have sexy Italian names. Otherwise, maybe it would be made in Modena.
Yeah, that'd be a cooler place to be than the Midlands. But
it's got the heritage at least.
Yeah,
we've got a kind of recurring segment we do on the podcast that we'd like to put you on the spot a little bit, if that's okay. We do a segment called Dream Car Garage. And it's something we do on each episode. We usually just make one up ourselves and come up with a hypothetical situation. They vary massively, but we'll read one out to you. If you could answer it, that would be really, really cool.
Daniel's already going to say De Tomaso, right? Clearly.
It's very true. Well, let's see.
Whatever the question.
So try and put yourselves in these shoes. It might be difficult, but we'll see. So you're a director of a brand new EV sports car company, and you need an electric daily driver. It's got to handle the usual, get into meetings, school runs, family trips, kind of basically the car that everybody sees you on, does the day-to-day. So you need a car for that. And then you also need, tucked away in your garage, a secret weapon, the petrol-soaked, tyre shredding, noise-making machine that's all about pure driving passion, or as it used to be before something that like Longbow comes out. There's no budget whatsoever. It's limitless, it's budgetless. That will be kind of your dream car garage, 2-car garage. What are you going for?
mine's come to a head immediately, Daniel. So maybe I can give you some time to think of the Tommaso alternative. The electric car, because I don't have a big family, I don't need a big car, and because I also still have the original charging socket and plug that I had to make because only American ones existed at the time, it would be a Tesla Roadster, unsurprisingly. And then the vehicle I would have that does all the tire smoking and doesn't do much for the lungs is going to be Shelby Daytona. I think it is one of the most beautiful cars. It's as raw as a vehicle can possibly get. Fortunate enough to know Peter Brock, who designed that car as well, and it just says everything to me. It's a shame it's Americana, but because it's based on the AC, there's that British part to it as well. So I'm going to have no children in my near-term future. Two-seaters.
I think that's a pretty good 2-car garage.
A Lucid Air Sapphire would be my family car because it's 1,500 horsepower and you can easily go and take the kids to school and get milk in it. And it's the best car in the world. Genuinely, nothing's close.
Really?
And then car is 288 GTO. It's my favorite car of all time. 288 GTO. I would sell the family to get the 288 GTO. So that's my 2-car garage.
I was hoping you were going to say a Seat Marbella there, Daniel, and then we could have lived out some memories in that.
I was hoping for the Jeans Fiat.
There is actually a Jeans Edition 288 GTO. It was good.
Yeah. Amazing. So we'll round up. We won't hold you too much longer. Firstly, thank you so much for spending time and reaching out and getting in touch and allowing us to interrogate you. So thank you so much. We're really, really excited to follow this journey. I don't know about yourself, but I'm more and more excited about this. My mind's been opened up just from our conversation today. So thank you for that. And I guess that moves on to kind of the most important question, and that's: do you deliver our long-term press cars, or do we come and collect those?
They're self-driving. They'll just show up at your door one day.
Even better. Fantastic. Like I said, we won't take you any long, but thank you so much for today. It's been amazing. Thank you for giving us the opportunity.
Cheers, thanks, guys. Pleasure. Thank you.